Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us on Business Incorporated. I'm Chimezie Obi Iwago. On the program today, Moody's says easing risk in Ivory Coast banking sector is a slow process. Dubai's DP World threatens legal action over Djibouti port row. Plus, Old Mutual appoints Deloitte as joint auditor in a blow to scandal-hit KPMG. Let's get the show started now with the markets, and the Nigerian market was the only one in the green at intraday today, up 0.35%. The South African JSE index was subdued by 0.71%. Egypt is closed for the weekend, and Kenya traded in the red on Thursday. In the meantime, in the Middle East, markets closed in a sea of red on Thursday. Qatar down 0.39%, Dubai down 0.28%, and Abu Dhabi down 0.10%. Saudi was down 0.31%. And in the U.S. stock index, futures were slightly up ahead of Friday's open as strict tensions between the U.S. and major economies took a backseat for the time being, while concerns about a potential broadening trade war between the U.S. and major economies keep investors on edge. Friday will see the release of a number of major corporate earnings. Now, before the bell, Citigroup, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo's, First Republic Bank, Infosys, and PNC Financial Services Group will publish their latest financial results. On the data front, import prices are due out at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, followed by consumer sentiment at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Elsewhere, the U.S. Federal Reserve is expected to publish its latest monetary policy report to the Congress. And let's cross over now to Europe, where stocks were higher Friday morning, tracking overnight gains on Wall Street amid elevated expectations of strong U.S. earnings. And U.S. President Donald Trump is still on his trip through Europe. Let's look at some of the outcome of his trip. Lars Holter, my colleague in Frankfurt, joins me now. Hello, Lars. Good afternoon. Thank God it's Friday.
Hello, Chimezie. Indeed, this Friday was an interesting week.
Sure, it was. Well, Donald Trump is one of those that have made it quite interesting. He is in the UK and he has criticized Theresa May for the way she's dealing with Brexit. He also says that a trade deal between the US and the UK is off the table if Britain stays in a common market with the rest of Europe. What's his strategy?
I wouldn't call it a strategy at all. Donald Trump, it seems like he's just playing his old games, this game of sowing division, pitting one party against another party. He's done it many times before, and now, of course, he is pitting the UK against the EU in, of course, an already very complicated situation with Brexit only about 9 months away. I am pretty sure that he doesn't really understand the consequences of what is going on here. I don't know if he understands what's at stake for Britain, for the EU, specifically, of course, for Britain, how in a hard Brexit case they would lose pretty much their entire financial services industry, how they lose out in terms of regular trade with goods and services, how expensive this would be for the British economy. So for him to just fly in here in this very divisive way and make a strong and emotional statement for a hard Brexit is just a terrible idea.
And one would ask, why is Donald Trump so eager to deal with Britain rather than the EU anyway? Now, the EU is a much larger market than the UK, isn't that so?
Yes, but trade is a very simple game for Donald Trump. It is about winning and losing, and he breaks it down in terms of a trade deficit, who is buying and who is selling. President Trump likes selling more than he likes buying, and when you look at it that way, the UK is a slightly more attractive partner for him because the US runs a slight trade surplus, actually, with the United Kingdom, and of course the US runs a trade deficit with the rest of the EU. Now, of course, things are not that easy, and no serious economist would look at trade that way. But Donald Trump certainly does, and so he wants to keep his active trade relationship with the UK, and he doesn't care about the EU's that much. Of course, if you turn it around for the United Kingdom, the US is their largest customer when it comes to exports, so that is, of course, their most important market too.
Well, that is why he's a businessman to the core. Right, let's move over to the U.S., where earnings season has started with quarterly numbers from some of the country's largest banks expected today. What do the markets want to see?
Well, expectations are certainly high. We are getting numbers today from JP Morgan, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, three of the largest banks in the country. And then early next week, you get Bank of America in the mix too, as well as Goldman Sachs. And of course, that is really the big start here into the earnings season. Expectations are high. Revenues are expected very high. And partially, of course, that has to do with recent market volatility. It was up, so trading revenue is supposed to be pretty strong. Generally, the banks have done pretty good business. So much for the expectations. It is unclear, of course, how that's going to translate into any gains for shares, because the environment generally on the stock markets is, of course, a very uncertain one with the current situation, with all the trade war and all the discussions that we're having right now. And the financial sector, of course, is right in the middle of it. So it is unclear, even if the numbers come in great for some of the large banks, it is unclear if investors can benefit from it right away.
All right, thank you very much for your time, Lars. It's been a wonderful week with you. Enjoy the weekend.